Hey guys, welcome back to Barely Enough. I'm Ryan Maybee with J. Rieger and Company, and we are live this time in the historic exhibit here at our wonderful distillery. Every other episode that we've done has been downstairs in the Hey Hey Club, but we are working on something really special right now at the Hey Hey Club for the impending holiday season, and so we couldn't use that tonight, so we decided to set up shop here in the historic exhibit, which is honestly one of my favorite rooms in this entire building. It's so special. It tells our story, and it's just chock full of like really cool little nuggets of historic information. I could spend hours in here. I have spent hours in here. I spent many hours of my life writing the stuff that made this historic exhibit. So we have a wonderful little museum, and I'm excited to be here right now. There's a lot of noise. Like, people are hanging out, having fun. It's kind of part of the cool part of like being here in the public space. Like, you never know what's going to happen. But we're right next to the whiskey display. So if you come here and check us out, we're like right by the whiskey display. We got all of our whiskeys up here. And don't forget that we are live, and I do have some people here assisting me. And so if you want to ask questions, I will be happy to answer them and kind of keep the conversation moving along. So last Barely Enough, we talked all about Kansas City whiskey. We did kind of a deep dive into what Kansas City whiskey is, how we resurrected it, the recipe, the formula, how we discovered sherry as an important ingredient and sourced that sherry from Spain, and how we came across this whole opportunity to really create a whole new category of American whiskey known as Kansas City whiskey. And we are the pioneers of that category. Today, because we're getting ready to, kick off the holiday season, as you can see, we are already decking the halls. We wanted to celebrate Kansas City whiskey once again with our seasonal commemorative collector's edition holiday Kansas City whiskey label. This is something that has become sort of a modern tradition of ours. We started doing it back in 2017, was the first year that we did our signature label. We've been partnering with Charlie Hustle. Charlie Hustle is another Kansas City company, Kansas City brand that we really love. They're good friends of ours. They're creative, share a lot of the same values and passion for Kansas City that we do. And so we've been collaborating with them every year on having them do an artistic rendering of our Kansas City whiskey label, pairing it with a t-shirt, this one now available in our gift shop, and also a mug. And on some years, we even have like a Christmas ornament or a scarf. You never know. So what I've got up here on the bar right now are not all of our historic holiday labels, but a handful of them. So I think this one right here from 2018, you'll notice a year on every label because we want to make sure that you know when it came about. That was our second one. This one here was pretty shortly after that. And I don't see it late. Oh, 2020. That one's 2020. You might notice that as we got further into this, we got more. We went further and further away from the original Kansas City whiskey label. We kind of adhered pretty close to it with this one here, but every year we just sort of ventured further and further on, like even incorporating colors like green into the label. This one here, which is entirely different. Sometimes we have like kind of a scenescape, something like that. Well, today we're unveiling this year's collector's edition label. I really love this one. It's got a piano on it with some candles. It says Kansas City Whiskey Holiday Edition. It's got 2023 down here in the bottom right here. Also, you'll notice this, it's got this cool little neck hanger where you can buy it and give it away as a gift, where it says from and to. So just really fun. And you can also kind of partner it with the whole package of the t-shirt and the mug. Now, if we're getting into the mug, there's something here, since we're in the historic exhibit, that I really want to point out. This image on the mug, on one side, we've got Rieger's on one side, and then on the other side, we have this image of Santa Claus holding up 2 bottles of Monogram whiskey. This has been on every mug that we have done since we started doing this, and it's even been on a couple of our t-shirts. We didn't just make this up. This is something, the holiday cheer and the Christmas spirit is something that has been a big part of J. Rieger and Company since way before Andy and I brought it back in 2014. In fact, I have a really cool piece here with me since we're in our historic exhibit demonstrating that. This is one of my favorite pieces that we have in our historic exhibit. It is our holiday offer from 1912. It might be kind of hard to see right here, but it's this really beautiful full page fold out insert that would have probably been in like a newspaper, something like that, and actually sent around the country. And you'll notice that right here, you got Santa Claus up here in the top left corner with those 2 bottles of Monogram whiskey. And that's where we get that image that we use to this day. But if you dig deeper into this, and this is usually on display in one of our cases, I pulled it out for this purpose. Reading it is just absolutely fascinating. Not only is this a Christmas offer where you can buy, let's see, Yuletide offer number 1, which is, I believe, 10 full quarts of Rieger's Monogram whiskey, and you put your money in the envelope and your name and address, and you ship it to us, and we send it to your front door. But we also have, and I don't have a lot of other examples of this from back then, but we have a recipe for eggnog. And I just love this, being a bartender, having that as my background, showing that we were actually taking pride in cocktails, holiday cocktails, way back then in 1912. And this recipe is really, really fascinating. It's 1 glass full of cold milk, 2 lumps or heaping teaspoonful of sugar, 1 fresh egg, half whiskey glass full of Rieger's grape brandy. Now that's a product that we obviously don't have today, but it's one of the many products that we would have had back then. We also did rum back then. So it calls for half a glass full of Rieger's dark rum. Now, well, that sounds kind of vague. It says half a glass full. Back then, a glass full was a specific measuring amount. And if I remember correctly, a glass full meant 2 ounces. So a public space. Since this is half a glass full of Rieger's dark rum, probably means 1 ounce of Rieger's dark rum. Shake well, strain into another glass, and then grate a little nutmeg on top and drink. Grating nutmeg on top of many cocktails, especially eggnog, is just really such a great finishing touch, great garnish. It's aromatic, it's beautiful. It just adds so much. But what I really love about this, so after giving you the recipe for the Yuletide eggnog here, it goes on to describe it. And at one point it says, drink it and you will feel real joy. You will experience the return of youth and the realization of happy dreams. I mean, it doesn't get much better than that. We should start writing copy like that again. I mean, that's kind of cool. On the back, on the other side, there's actually a printing of The Night Before Christmas and a really thoughtful letter on the lesson of Christmas. It says J. Rieger & Company's message to customers and friends with this really beautiful letter to their customers and a Christmas resolution for everyone. And says, from J. Rieger & Company, Kansas City, Missouri, Christmas 1912. And even on this side, it says, suitable for framing. So we have it framed here in our historic exhibit. If you ever want to come by and take a closer look at it, it's really a cool thing. So we're talking about holiday cocktails, specifically eggnog. And I want to talk about eggnog because I really love eggnog, and I understand it's kind of a polarizing ingredient. So, you know, since we don't make grape brandy or grape spirit, and we also don't do rum. We were importing rum back then. We didn't actually distill it here, but we were importing rum back in the day. I kind of took that concept of eggnog, and I think eggnog should be, that was a single serving recipe, but eggnog should be a batch recipe for a larger group. So maybe, you know, if you're going to batch up a holiday batch of eggnog, just like anything else, make enough for, say, 8 to 10 people if you're hosting like a dinner party or a Christmas holiday party, something like that. And then you can always scale the recipe depending on how many people you actually have. But my favorite recipe for what I refer to as Rieger's Yuletide Nog, is to take 6 large eggs, 1 cup of sugar, 8 ounces of Rieger's Kansas City whiskey, so about a third of a bottle, 3 ounces of rum, and that's what I'm going to talk about, this rum right here. Ron de Barrilito. Oh man, from Puerto Rico. This rum is just fantastic. Hard to find, but not crazy expensive. It's not like super fancy. It's just really, really, really good. I like using this in my my eggnog recipe. It's just wonderful. And then I also like to add 3 ounces of Cafe Amaro. The coffee, and I'll think about all the spices, the cardamom, the vanilla, the star anise, and all those things, all those spices that are in our Cafe Amaro, they just work so well in that type of drink, that creamy, sweet, eggnog type drink. Then you're going to add 2 cups of whole milk, 1.5 cups heavy cream. You're going to whip up the eggs with the cream and the milk in a blender with the sugar, get it all nice and emulsified, and then add your booze, and voila, you're good to go. Now, another thing that I like to talk about when it comes to eggnog is aging eggnog. It might sound a little controversial, and there are definitely debates on the subject, but aging eggnog can actually provide a lot of benefits. It mellows over time, creates a nice texture, and you have to refrigerate it, obviously, but if you mix up that whole batch, put it in your refrigerator, it can age for up to a year or even longer. So people say, well, isn't it dangerous? I mean, the eggs and the risk of salmonella. First off, roughly 1 in 20,000 eggs produced in the United States actually might possibly be tainted with salmonella. So that's 0.04% already. So you're talking a minuscule risk. Second, we know that alcohol kills bacteria, kills bugs, and it does a really, really good job of it. In this case, that eggnog recipe is going to be about a 20% alcohol by volume drink, so pretty high for a mixed drink. And if you let it sit longer, the more effective the alcohol is on killing any potential bacteria. So frankly, there's no risk in doing it. It's actually a lot safer to mix up a batch of that eggnog recipe, put in your refrigerator for 6 months, than it is to buy your eggnog in a carton without any alcohol in it in the store. There's actually more of a risk of getting any kind of bacteria in that. So it's actually pretty safe. It makes a great gift. I like to do it like I'll mix up, a couple large batches of that eggnog recipe, put it in my refrigerator and say like August, and then give it away as gifts around Christmas time, and people just love it. So really, really delicious. Still packs quite a kick. It's a lot of fun. I did have a question come in here. This is our 7th edition of the Rieger holiday label. So we started in 2017, was the first year that we did it. I'm missing that one up here, and I'm missing last year's, I believe. So this current one is edition number 7 of Rieger's Kansas City Whiskey holiday label. Other drinks that you can make that are good for house parties, Christmas, holiday events, that kind of thing. I always like doing a hot drink. Mulled whiskey cider is one of my favorite. And we also do that here at the distillery, and it's actually this recipe that we use. But I'll batch it out in a pretty large batch to start with, using a whole bottle of Kansas City whiskey. I'll use 4 ounces of a St. Elizabeth allspice dram, which is a sweet liqueur from the islands, made with allspice. Pretty intense, pretty rich. Doesn't take a whole lot, so only 4 ounces of that for the whole batch. I'll use 8 ounces of honey syrup. I think that honey and cider and whiskey and all that just works so good together. A little bit of lemon juice, 24 ounces of apple cider, and then I like to use tea. Tea is an ingredient that I think gets underappreciated and underused. I like to use it in a hot cider recipe. I also like to use it in punch, cold punch, but in this case, I like to use the equal amounts black tea with apple cider. So in this particular recipe, 24 ounces of each. And the kind of bitterness of the black tea is going to balance out the sweetness of that apple cider, and it's going to be really, really nice. Finally, you're going to use 6 cinnamon sticks, tablespoon of cloves, and 3 star anises. You're going to simmer the spices in the cider, and then marry that with the tea to create your base, and then add the other ingredients. Add the honey syrup, the lemon, the whiskey and the allspice dram, and there you go. Keep it hot. You can put it in one of those urns, like with a little spigot on it, for easy, quick service in the mug, or you can just kind of heat it up on your stovetop, however you want to do it, or in a kettle, something like that, and it works really, really well. It's also a really fun recipe. It's a fun recipe to also come up with like a flavored whipped cream, because it's actually kind of a relatively light. I mean, it's got richness of flavor and sweetness to it, but it's light on the palate. It's not heavy on the palate like the eggnog is. So you can get creative and come up with like a flavored whipped cream to go on the top. Like I like using absinthe in whipped cream, and making an absinthe flavored whipped cream can be really cool for something like that. We had another question about how you take a single serving cocktail and then extrapolate it into a batch. Essentially, I mean, if you have, you know, one cocktail recipe, like most of them are, and you want to make a batch, you just multiply it by the number of people that you want to serve, or the number of drinks that you want to have in the batch. Now, it doesn't always work out quite like that, so it's important to taste along the way. So ingredients like bitters and really strong liqueurs like that. So the more you scale it up, you're going to run into potential issues. And so it's important to kind of do it to taste, right? And that's kind of one of the fun parts about making a batch recipe for a large gathering at your home. For me, it's sort of ritualistic. It's sort of calming. I love doing it. It's just like cooking for a large group of people, but kind of tasting it as you go, making adjustments where you need to be, and it ends up where it ends up. And it's always really fun. The last batch I'm going to talk about is classic punch. There's really nothing like serving a classic punch. A recipe that I created that I do every year during the holidays with my neighbors. They have this really cool old mansion called the Buyer's Mansion, and it's an Airbnb event space, but beautiful, ornate old building that is right next door to mine. And so I created this punch for them called the Royal Buyer's Punch, and it is a bottle of Kansas City whiskey. It is 12 ounces of rainwater Madeira. I like using fortified wines in punches, so Madeira, sherry, less so port, but those two they kind of strike a nice balance between savory and sweet. So in this one, I use 12 ounces of rainwater Madeira. Oleo saccharum is really the key here. To make a punch, you really need to start at least 24 hours before you're ready to serve it. It's kind of it is again a tradition, and something that you want to take your time with and make sure that you're doing it right. Oleo saccharum essentially means oil of sugar, and what you're doing is, so you're going to take primarily lemons. You can use some other citrus, but you're mostly going to use lemons. You're going to peel them, right? Just for the peel. Make sure you don't get a lot of pith. Say 6 or 8 of them. Put them in a mason jar or in like a quart plastic container of some sort. Use about a cup of sugar in there, and kind of agitate it, shake it up, make sure that the sugar is like fully coating all of the lemon peels. Maybe even use a muddler and kind of mash it up a little bit. Just make sure that it's all integrated and mixed up. Put a lid on it, set it aside. You don't even have to put it in the fridge. You can let it sit out overnight on the countertop, whatever. And what you're going to find the next day is that it has turned into this really thick, goopy consistency. And the lemon peels themselves, which started out as like really bright and yellow and lively, are now wilted, and they're kind of shrunk down. The sugar has drawn all that oil out. And so, yes, it's really, really sweet. But when you take off the top and you smell it, you're just hit with this like pungent citrusy aroma. And that is your base for your punch. It's no different than, say, using a stock for a soup, right? And you're going to start with that. You're going to take that oleo saccharum and you're going to put that in the bottom of your punch bowl, and then you're going to add your spirits, and you're just going to stir. You don't need to shake anything here. You don't need to do any crazy techniques, but you're going to add your whiskey, you're going to add your Madeira, and just using a long handled bar spoon, you're going to stir it up, agitate it. Because the sugar is already kind of turned into a syrup, it's going to dissolve on its own. And then you're going to add lemon juice, in this case 6 ounces, and then back to the tea again. Whereas I use black tea in the mulled cider. In this case, I'm going to use mint green tea, and again, about 24 ounces because you need to dilute that down. And then you're pretty much done. You've now diluted it down to about a serving size of roughly, let's call it 70 or so ounces. And if each cocktail is, each cup is 3 ounces, you're going to get about 20 or so servings out of it, or maybe a little more. You can also get really ornate with the presentation by using one giant block of ice and put it in the bowl. And then the garnish is kind of the most important thing. It's the finishing touch, where you're going to take a lot of like half wheels of oranges, stud them with cloves, lay them in the top of the bowl. They'll float. And then maybe use some cranberries as well. Drop them in the bowl so that contrast of the color between the red and the cranberries and the beautiful oranges with the cloves. And then grate a little nutmeg over the top, and it just pops with color and aroma, and it's just fantastic. And I get tons and tons of compliments every year, and then I also get tons and tons of comments about how people got totally hammered off of my punches because they did not realize just how strong they were. So you got to be careful. But Aunt Sally like dipping into the punch, like thinking, oh, it's a good time, but holy shit. For a large batch hot cocktail, how do you keep it hot? Yeah, crock pot works great. One of those electric urns that has like the spout on the front is a good way to do it. Stovetop is fine. You just kind of have to keep checking it. Don't let it boil over or anything like that. I'd say a crock pot is pretty good. Like in bar settings in the past where I've actually served a hot batch cocktail, it's usually been a crock pot that has a temperature setting so you can kind of moderate it and keep it, nice and hot without being too scalding or losing track of it. Let's see, what else do we have here? We've talked a lot about holiday Kansas City whiskey. We talked about our traditions here, which is really, really cool. And we've touched on some batch cocktails. Maybe in the next episode, as we get closer to the holidays, we'll actually demo some of those batch cocktails, which I think would be really, really fun. But experiment with them. And if you're interested, try aging your eggnog. Like make it now and put it in the fridge and revisit in 6 weeks for Christmas. It's really kind of a fun little experiment to do, and it's a fun gift. What's pairing with eggnog? Go-to Christmas pairing, cigar would be my go-to Christmas pairing. I don't have a huge sweet tooth. I do like creamy kind of sweet drinks like eggnog, White Russians, that kind of thing. But I don't have a huge sweet tooth when it comes to dessert. The eggnog is my dessert, or even that mulled whiskey cider would be a really good way to go. Pairing would be, I'd say like keeping it simple. You could do chocolate, you could do nuts, that kind of thing, like mixed nuts, cashews, that kind of thing is going to work really well. On the last recipe, sugar only or sugar and lemon peels. It's sugar in the oleosaccharum. It's sugar and lemon peels together in a mason jar or in a container, a quart container of some sort, and let them marinate. Let it sit like for 24 hours, and you'll see this transformation. It's wild, but it adds layers of flavor, and it's like I said, it's kind of like using a stock for a soup. You might say to yourself, well, why can't I just add all those ingredients all at once at the same time? Well, sure. But, there is a process that takes place when you let it marinate overnight, or if you use a stock that's been like steeped in, the bones and the different vegetables and all those different things for a certain amount of time. It adds just layers of flavor and texture. The texture of a well-made traditional punch like that is unlike any other. Oleosaccharum is what does that. And you're not going to get that without oleosaccharum. It's going to kind of feel lean and kind of watery and alcoholic, right? I think that's part of the reason that sometimes people are caught off guard by just how much alcohol is in my punches, because they just don't notice it because of that mouthfeel and that richness and that texture and those layers of flavor. It's just so well integrated, and you can't do that without doing it properly with oleo. If you want to learn more about that, the best book on the market is called Punch by Dave Wondrich. He actually first published a book called Imbibe that kind of put him on the map. He's a James Beard Award winner. He's a New York Times bestseller. He's an absolute legend. He's kind of known as the foremost cocktail historian in the world. And he wrote a book about punch, like dating it back to the 1600s and chronicling these techniques, these methods, and the popularity of them. You know, the punch bowl, it preceded the modern day cocktail. It used to be if you were drinking a mixed alcoholic beverage, you were sitting around a bowl of punch with a group of friends and you drink it until it's gone. And it wasn't until later in the mid 1800s that we had this crazy idea to like make single serving cocktails, but it all started off as punch, and it used to be a really important thing. We don't see it quite as much today, but I really think that for the holidays like this, it's really special, and it's just a very, very cool experience. And it's so fun to see that, you know, like J. Rieger and Company, our company here, appreciate it, like with these really ornate punch bowls, even back in the early 1900s. So you can go to your local antique store, anything like that. You can find these beautiful crystal punch bowls for relatively cheap, like $30 with, you know, full sets. It's really cool. I'm running out of things to talk about here. So, all right, if there are no more questions, we'll wrap it up. Thank you for joining me. Please don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel. Smash that like button, the subscribe button. This has been Barely Enough. Again, too much of anything can be bad for you, but too much good whiskey is barely enough, as said by the legendary Mark Twain. So thank you again. I'm Ryan Maybee, and happy holidays.